Good morning, everyone. This is the Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. I'm Stephen Gockley, co-chair with Jack Hovenier. This is our September 19th, 2022 meeting. I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Good morning, everyone. Call the meeting to order. Everyone has had a chance to look at the agenda, and if there are any suggestions about changes, you could make them now. Any additions? Seeing none, we'll plunge right in. And the first item on the agenda is Task Force Public Communications, for which we have a contract with Pyramid Communications, and we've invited our partners, Emily Getz, Sakara Ramu, and I didn't see John on this, folks. He's not here. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Sakara and Emily at this point for presentation they want to make on the work that they've plotted out for us. I will start off by saying that the steering committee has been working with Sakara and Emily a bit to organize this, and we're really excited about them, about their skills, and about what they have in mind for advancing our external communications for the task force's work. I don't know which one of you wants to take the lead on this, but I'll just turn it over to you, Sakara.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to kick it over to Emily to get us started.
Okay.
Sure. So I will go ahead and share my screen here. Hello, everyone. I am Emily. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with Pyramid Communications. It's so good to be with you all today. Can you see this presentation?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. All right. So we are really happy to be here with you all today. I think what we're going to do is give kind of a high-level overview of our work and focus with you all. We'll keep it pretty quick and happy to answer any questions that come up, but we don't want to take too much of your time today in your overall agenda. So starting with an overview of our work together, Whatcom County has led in Washington State and nationally on a comprehensive and transformative response to community health and safety. The Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force, founded in 2015, has been instrumental in that work, and in partnership with the county, delivered significant accomplishments. At the same time, we know that much has changed in the landscape surrounding this work since the task force's founding and initial charge. We know that today, Whatcom County and the task force continue to be focused on working alongside community to bring policies, programs, and commitments in the criminal, legal, and public safety systems to reality, balancing always community health with safety and responding to a continually evolving need while proactively building for the future. And we know that success will rely on building awareness and understanding with county residents of today's need, a vision for success, the work, and what it takes. So our objectives with this initial body of work that we are partnering on together are to create a communications and community engagement structure that supports the task force's goals, and to create a narrative frame and core messaging that can be brought to life through communications and community engagement. Very specifically, we will be creating 2 to 4 sets of key messages that are approved by the steering committee to communicate to our target audience and community at large. And we'll be creating an initial communications plan to activate and test messaging in line with the structure we create. This is our overall work plan. So you can see what we've done to date, where we're focused now, and where we'll be focused moving forward. To date, we've been really focused on kind of launching the project, digging into discovery to build our understanding and fluency with what you all have accomplished to date. We are currently now in the process of developing narrative and messaging that will be carried across communications efforts. And then we will move from there into some message testing. We'll do that through focus groups and through digital strategies. And then from there, we'll be finalizing narrative message framework, communications planning, and a framework that supports ease of use and ongoing use by the task force into the future. Sakara, do you want to talk about our kind of approach to narrative and messaging through this work?
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm assuming so. Okay. So thank you all. I'm Sakara Remu. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the principal of Temple Water Consulting. We have a very strong and close partnership with Pyramid Communications, and we're very excited to see this RFP, very excited to support, as Emily said, really groundbreaking work that has been done in Whatcom County that is potentially a blueprint for others. And the importance of communicating out coalition work to community is something that we're both very familiar with, and have really enjoyed the challenge of, as Emily said, just the discovery of the work, the history of the work, working with both the leadership of the steering committee and the steering committee to really understand how things have changed, Emily said, and how best we can utilize messaging. And we're starting at the very beginning, which we love, to help set that framework for you all. And so we will utilize a narrative structure for messaging that leaves with an overarching values-based framing of what it is that you all are doing in Whatcom County, tells the story from the beginning, and with each initiative-specific moment, whether it's a dual response or transitional housing or the Center for Hope, consistently pointing back to the why you all are doing this work and the goals of the work. Next slide. So we wanted to give you just a little bit of a peek into the narrative structure. It will introduce audiences to the task force, contextualizing and illuminating your work from founding to current, focused based on a continually evolving landscape. We had a wonderful meeting with the steering committee that really drove that home for us, and is really aiding us in developing this framework and the messaging. The structure will be grounded in simple, compelling, values-driven, overarching framing. So we will start with the need, the solution, proof of concept, and current state of the work and initiative-specific comms. So we'll start by contextualizing the task force reason for being at the time of founding, explain the need and the current state as of founding. Having set that context, we'll introduce the task force and the solutions it was founded to deliver, the proof of the concept of the task force and this work in transforming criminal legal systems. The Center for Hope, we will be focusing on, offers an opportunity to communicate success to date and build an understanding of the work. And it also offers us kind of a transition point in messaging to speak to some of what has changed since you all began this work. And once we have gotten through that introductory piece, we'll continue to build an understanding of the current state now, the needs today, and solutions and work in progress through, again, initiative-specific communications. Next slide. With the messaging structure and key messages for the task force's priorities, we'll create an initial communications plan, as Emily mentioned, and the assets to test messaging in line with the structure we create. So assets are things like, I'm blanking, social media posts, op-ed language, text and copy for websites. We develop those branding. We develop those assets to test. Next slide. The goals of testing are to establish the task force positioning, build our audience base, and build confidence in this process of communications and build confidence in the work itself. So we're introducing the task force to specific audiences and building an understanding of who the task force is, why it exists, what it does. We will establish channels and work to build a following for communications, and we'll utilize the Center for Hope as the lens and focal point for this initial message testing. Building confidence, we like to start with, it's always great to communicate hope and wins as a starting point, as a demonstrated impact. Next slide. The audiences are pretty broad, but they're broadly specific. They're audiences that we know that we can track. Whatcom County residents, community leaders and partners critical to the work in motion, elected leaders in their constituencies, and local funders, philanthropic community. And I mentioned earlier the assets that we will be developing. This is just a peek into that. So aligned overarching branding for the task force, a centralized page or website to house communications and community engagement working forward, revisions to existing web content, final messaging and proof points for testing, and Deacon Center for Hope branding, social content and graphics, update format and content, one-pagers, fact sheets, a presentation deck for you all to use when you're out in community, giving presentations on the work that you're doing, postering in community, which is a very effective way to get people's attention and get them access to information, and then toolkits for partners and key messenger activation. Next slide. That is it. Emily, do you have anything you wanted to add on the tail end?
No, I don't think so. Thank you. But happy to make any space for questions or comments or additions from anyone.
Do you mind going back to slide 9?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll just share my thoughts. I feel some hope and confidence about other planning efforts unrelated to this one, just by seeing this example of how you're organizing your effort. It looks really good and effective. So thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, that was Mayor of Bellingham, Seth Fleetwood, commending you. So
Thank you.
Appreciate that very much.
other questions or comments for either Emily or Sakara? They've done an amazing job in our estimation of grasping the values and appreciating the innovation over time from the task force. And I think we're starting to get into a nitty-gritty phase where the messages are really being developed and the strategy is really being refined. So you're seeing the front end of that that stage of this work. Remember that all of this comes out of our collective acknowledgement that we have not done a very good job over the years of making our work known to the wider public, and also opening up opportunities for input from the public into the directions and the priorities that we set. So it's our hope that that the work with Pyramid and Temple Water will kickstart that kind of relationship with the general public, and I think the plan that they've laid out for us holds considerable promise. So I don't see any other questions. And so I'll thank the two of you for your work to date, for the presentation, and for the chance to move forward with what we have on tap.
Thank you all very much. It was great to be here.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks for joining us this morning.
Have a great week.
Thank you. Jack, I'm going to turn this back to you for Justice Project Needs Assessment.
Okay, and I don't see Barry, so I think Stephen, this is you and I. So as a reminder, this is sort of an update of what's going on with the Stakeholders Advisory Committee. Obviously, many of you were at the meeting we had last, I believe it was Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, Wednesday or Thursday, where we talked at length with a presentation, particularly from Whatcom County Corrections. Lieutenant Erickson gave a lot of information about the current downtown facility, as well as some of the data and information that's necessary for the Stakeholders Advisory Committee to work on the needs assessment. Other than maybe highlighting that, what I can say is we are continuing to meet on a weekly basis, we being the leadership team of the Stakeholders Advisory Committee. We have, I believe, 3 more meetings scheduled for the group as a whole. I could be mistaken on that, but spread out over the next couple of months. We are meeting a lot. We actually have a facilities meeting, which is sort of, would you call that a special meeting, Stephen? I don't think it was one of the regular ones that we're adding next week.
No, we did add another meeting. There was really a full discussion the last time, and we just needed more to push ahead with it.
We've also been gathering information from the Stakeholders Advisory Committee, I think in part to identify where people's perceptions are, as well as, from my perspective, an effort to build some consensus on the basic issues. An example of that would be the issue of whether I can't call it downtown, I need to call it Civic Center, but the jail that's next to the courthouse on 311 Grand Avenue. But when I was a paper boy, it was downtown, but I guess it's the Civic Center now. Anyway, but that facility, we polled the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, and it was clear from that a majority, I would say off the top of my head, roughly 85% either agreed it needed to be replaced, or basically agreed there was, I think, one perspective that it didn't and a couple that weren't sure. But the reason we're trying to do that is, while it's nice to get total consensus, it's also important to understand where the committee is as a whole, because it's difficult to make the recommendations and do the needs assessment if we don't have some common agreement on some of the basics. Some other information that came out of that survey that may be of interest to some of you, or what were the priorities, whether that's in a new facility or what things should be identified as appropriate services, things like mental health, things like housing, things like access to medical, things like access for visitation. And that data is available if you're interested to see what the results are. I found it really useful in understanding where people's perspectives were in seeing it all combined and shared. I think was really useful. So those are kind of the high level things that I would say are going on. Much of our leadership meetings are really to try to make the best use of the large meetings when we gather together, as well as staying very cognizant of the fact that we have an obligation to make recommendations to the council, but also to this task force, because it is the hope of at least the leadership of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee that once the needs assessment and some recommendations are forthcoming, that those be either shared or influenced by or given input from this task force. Also, we of course serve as the Law and Justice Council, and so those various perspectives are also a part of this process. Stephen, you want to add anything else about those are the things that really occur to me about where we are.
Yeah, I'll just add 2 quick comments to your very good summary, Jack. One is one of the things that we saw at our last meeting was the unveiling of the results of a survey we had done of current inmates of the jail. I found that very informative. It was something that SAC members had asked for, and actually people periodically over the history of the task force have asked for some feedback and opinions from people with lived experience with the jail, not just as a bricks and mortar facility, but in terms of the services that were there or not there. And so there were quite a number of slides, and really I think they were just summarizing a longer survey result. I would really encourage task force members to go into the SAC website and take a look at that information, as well as all the other information that's there. I think, many of us are on the SAC, but many of us are not also, but that latter group also, in my mind, has a responsibility to sort of stay current with the information that's flowing out of this, because there's been a lot of work going into this that benefits the task force as a whole. And in the end, it's our hope that there will be alignment between the task force and the recommendations of the SAC, so that it goes forward with some consensus when it gets delivered to the county council. So I think I'd just highlight the inmate survey, and encourage you all to try to keep track through the website with the SAC work, just for your own informational purposes. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, that survey had roughly a 30% participation rate. My recollection was there was a small group that didn't participate because they weren't asked to, because they were extremely high risk, and it wasn't a demographic that was easy to work with. But other than that, it was a high percentage of people there. So that information also is great. And I would feel remiss if I didn't say that particularly the last few weeks, both with a video that the Stakeholder Advisory Committee did in the jail, where we were in the jail the better part of a day, as well as all this information. I do want to thank the Corrections Office, particularly Lieutenant Erickson and Wendy Jones and the Sheriff, for being extremely forthcoming with data as best they can, and trying to reduce any barriers to getting information that would be useful to us as Law and Justice Council or with SAC, just to try to get as much information as you can, with the reality that you still got a working jail that is in progress. And I appreciate that, because we've really been given, as far as I can tell, about everything we've asked for that's reasonable. So thank you. And anybody, let's see, I think that's probably, without Barry, I think that's probably it. So are there any questions for that? Or we've got a nice segue now to move into an update on obtaining additional jail bed space. But are there any questions about the status of where the Justice Project needs assessment is? All right, so seeing none, Lieutenant Erickson, am I turning, is this you taking this on initially, or?
I believe either Chief Jones or the sheriff will have up-to-date information here, and I think I saw both of them here.
Okay, well, I see Chief Jones just turned on her camera, so I'm suspecting she's going to start. And you're muted, Wendy.
There we go. I don't want to upstage the sheriff, but I know that he'd been out on vacation. I'm still trying to find some additional beds. I've reached out to SCORE, and I don't know if both their director and their contract manager are out on leave time or what, but I haven't gotten a response. So today I'll resort to the old-fashioned way of picking up the phone and calling and see if I can find out. I know that SCORE has had beds available, and I'm hoping that they would extend that to us. It would not be as convenient as Snohomish, but since that plug got pulled at the last minute by Snohomish County, we're looking for another place. Interestingly enough, I was contacted by somebody from, now I've forgotten the community. It's one of the municipalities in North King County, who was looking to see if we had jail space that we could rent. And so we compared who she had contacted versus who we've contacted. And unfortunately, most of the jails that seem to have some space are over east of the mountains, which creates huge problems for pretrial offenders. It's very, very difficult for them to work with their attorneys. And since almost all of our offenders are pretrial felons, people are being charged with a very high level of offense, relatively speaking. If there was a way of just moving a lot of sentenced offenders over there, it makes it much easier because the attorneys don't have the reason, neither does the court, in order to interact with them, but that's just not where we're at right now. So I'm going to continue to be pushy, and hopefully we'll have better information in the very near future. One more thing, the last good thing is that we've dropped population a little bit, which is nice. We were at 318 this morning, and that on a Monday after a weekend, we haven't seen that for quite a while. So I'm not sure kind of where we're at with that or why, but I'll take it. So.
Thank you, Chief Jones. And I've got a couple hands. Chief Mertzig and then Stephen.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I had some conversations with my former employer, which is Snohomish County, and they encourage us to revisit that in January after their budget talks are over. So that might be something we look back at again.
Thank you very much, Chief Mertzig. It's always nice to have formal and more informal lines of communication. So I appreciate that.
Stephen, and then Sheriff Alfo.
Jack, yeah, I see Sheriff Alfo just came on, and I would defer to him first to add to Wendy's information. Chief? Sheriff, I mean.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just want to add that the conditions in the jail are declining. And we're losing a lot of good people working up there that are frustrated with the lack of movement on this thing. It's been a known problem in our community for many years. While we are searching out and reaching out for any alternatives for space that is workable, you know, and I'm glad that Chief Mertzig is helping us try to lobby for us with Snohomish County to see if perhaps they'll revisit that issue after the first of the year. Out of county jail contracts are not a long-term solution. I would consider them an emergency solution. They cause the impediments to the entire criminal justice system, but more importantly, they're unreliable. We've had contracts with Snohomish County in the past, going back before they built the work center. And, you know, on very short notice, they had their own needs, which of course they had to meet first. And we got 30 days notice to get 35 offenders, I think we had at the time there. We've had contracts with Yakima in the past that have canceled when more lucrative contracts become available. So this is a last ditch, last resort thing. And I just want to press the urgency of moving forward with a new jail that's workable. I know this is whatever we do now, even if this were something that were on the ballot in 2023, we're still looking 5 years out. So we're in a very difficult situation in terms of continuing safe and constitutional operations, as well as keeping our good and dedicated staff that continue to work there despite the conditions. And we're seeing the shutdown of the criminal justice system due to COVID. That's still having impacts. People have been sitting in there since 2017, 2018, waiting for trials. And while some of the other government functions, due to a Supreme Court order, can't function, namely the courts, and because of some of the infrastructure limitations, We're still, our people come to work, they catch COVID, they can't get home to their families. And I just ask that the task force make this the highest priority, is to get this situation rectified. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Stephen?
It wasn't going to be my original comment, but I would just like to respond to the sheriff and assure him that both the SAC and the task force are aware of the rock on one hand and the hard place on the other that we're in for county corrections, and are making every effort to move as rapidly as possible. The SAC has asked the council, and Council Member Buchanan has agreed to try to layer some of the steps of the Justice Project planning process, which were going to be sequential, and start to get a head start on some of the things that can be done now, some of the groundwork that can be laid for the planning effort. So everybody that I'm talking to is indeed taking the current situation seriously. And I appreciate your persistence, Sheriff, in keeping that in front of us as we do this work. I wanted to respond to Wendy's comments. Wendy, just for the public record, and because the general public might be looking at this recording, you referenced contacting SCORE, and I wonder if you could spell out what SCORE is and the location that it is, so that we know its relation to Snohomish County, which you referred to.
Certainly, SCORE is the Southern Correctional
Entity.
I know entity is the end. I just can't remember the middle. It's basically a rather unique jail that was put together at the behest of 7 of the municipalities down in South King County, and was primarily designed for misdemeanor offenders, because the whole thing got triggered when King County jail system contacted Tukwila and Burien and Auburn and all the ones down in South King County, told them that they were going to not hold their misdemeanors anymore. They gave them a 10-year lag period. So there was an individual who created this as a political entity, and they built SCORE. It is down in Burien, so it's south of Seattle, down by South Center. And of course, as anybody knows who's driven south, trying to get through Seattle is, of course, a challenge. So it's going to add time. But on the other hand, we do go down to Tacoma on a regular basis to take folks back and forth to the state psychiatric hospital. So it won't be that huge an impact. It's just going to be some overtime.
Thanks for that clarification, Wendy. I appreciate it.
I'm thinking, because Caleb has his hand up, he may actually remember what the entire title of the facility is. I'm sorry, I haven't had enough coffee yet this morning, evidently.
Lieutenant Erickson.
Good morning. So yes, SCORE stands for South Correctional Entity. It's a roughly 600 bed facility. It is only misdemeanor housing, although there isn't any clarity at this point whether they would house anybody for felonies for us specifically. But with their 600 bed capacity, they may or may not at given times have the ability to house additional inmates at a cost. And as the chief points out, it's down there in Burien. So hopefully that clears all that up. If you have other questions, I can help.
Darlene.
Hi, I was just going to let you know that the city of Bellingham is currently using SCORE, and we do have a video set up with them. They've been very workable, have done a lot of things with us where we have a date set up when we have cases with them each week. But I will tell you, one of the biggest struggles is for public defense to be able to meet with their clients. It's a very hard thing. When we used them before, the public defense agency that we had actually hired an attorney down there to be on their staff part-time to help with meeting with defendants. We had that occur in Yakima as well. And that would be one of the things that any public defense people would want to look at, is if we do go that route with a place that is further away, it's one of the considerations that you might want to look at.
Great, thank you. Really?
Thank you. I just want to echo what Darlene was saying on the need for public defense to be able to move cases along. And I have heard from numerous attorneys in the county that have told me there's a shortage of attorneys as well. And trying to get adequate staffing throughout the state may be a challenge for cases in our county as well as down south. I don't know if Maya has any other feedback on that, but I really want to make sure that we're not delaying cases for defendants that are incarcerated because we can't get defense to resolve their cases because they can't communicate with them. So we really need to work on that issue if we do move people.
Maya, I see you turn on your camera. Would you like to say something on that?
Oh, I just agree with the comments that have been made regarding public defense. I don't think there's somebody that we could just retain, and I don't think that would work for all of the attorneys that we have. You know, the SCORE facility is I mean, Snohomish was already the idea of traveling there to meet with our clients was really difficult to imagine how much time that would require. Traveling to SCORE is just, I can't imagine what that would be like. Just something that Sheriff Alpho said, just impact, like you mentioned, Sheriff, that you thought there were cases with defendants from 2018 that were, I was just looking at Wendy's inmate incarceration aging summary report. And I mean, the longest someone has been in awaiting trial, it looks like, is 28 months, and that's not a public defender client. And the longest was an attempted murder that's scheduled for trial in November is then 22 months the person's been in custody. So I think you said that people have been in since 2018, and I don't think that that's accurate. I mean, there are people that have been in there for up to almost 2 years at this point with very serious cases or very serious mental health concerns, like 3-strike cases and mostly like murders. And so I just wanted to point out that information. Thanks.
Yeah, I know there were, oh,
Go ahead, Sheriff. I knew Wendy wouldn't mind if you went first to respond to that.
yeah, I know there's, Wendy does a thorough analysis of that, but I know there was a murder case that was from 2018 that was just, I believe it was 28, just recently was resolved. And a lot of this doesn't have to do directly with the public defender's or prosecutor's office. It's the old issue with getting people competency evaluations and treatment, and then the process starts over when they get back in the jail. But Wendy can elaborate further on some of the delays that we're experiencing and some of the factors that contribute to that.
Chief Jones?
Well, when I forgot why I had put my hand up, but both Maya and the sheriff are correct in that probably in the last 2 months, we've been able to clear some of those cases that were going back 2018, 2019, and they were very, as Maya pointed out, very high profile. We're still running an average daily population now of 23 days. So that's still a long time. And it is complicated by the competency restoration issues. I know that you've heard about that before. And for those of you who are also on the SAC, you've heard about it ad nauseum before. And that's not getting any better in the near future. I know that there was something that flitted through that was it. I've reached that magic age where sometimes it disappears for a while and then shows back up. We may, I'm going to still open that conversation with SCORE as soon as I hear from them, but we are going into the time of year which for the jail tends to drop population. Part of that is because it appears that both law enforcement and the courts don't want somebody in custody over the holidays. And so it's kind of like, if we can make it through the end of the year, and especially if Snohomish is willing to re-enter negotiations with us, we may be able to only have to use SCORE for a short period of time or avoid using it altogether. I don't know. A lot of it's going to depend on what we get, because the jail is a very reactive entity. We only deal with the things that are brought to us. But statistically, if you look back at average daily population, it starts dropping usually the first part of November. And again, that has been historical for as long as I've been involved in the system. So we may be, by the judicious use of this very scarce resource and the fact that nobody wants to be the Grinch over the holidays, we may be able to get through until the first of the year. And then we could revisit the whole issue with Snohomish, because if we have to have a place remote from this facility, and we will, before a new jail could be built, even if the money ferry came and dropped that on the county today. Snohomish would be much easier to get to, avoiding Seattle traffic at all costs, than SCORE would, even with the transport system we have set up. So I think that's it. I'll be quiet then.
Thank you. And Sheriff, did you have anything else? Okay.
No, just pushing the wrong buttons.
That happens. I announced a cruise the other day in the SAC meeting. So yeah, pushing the wrong buttons is very possible. All right. Yeah, that was embarrassing. All right. I think we are through this topic. And so the next on our agenda is, Stephen, this is you and Mike Parker, the update, the racial equity implementation strategy for this task force. And if you would like, let's see, I don't see Mike, I don't think, unless I'm missing him. No, I don't think he's here. So Stephen, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay, well, my report will be very limited because I was out of town when the steering committee discussed this week before last. So Jack, you can step in anytime and add anything that came up in that discussion. When we last reported, we had a sort of a menu of possible steps that we could take to implement the racial equity toolkit. Even though it was becoming clear that we were not going to be able to have, as a task force, access to the resources that GARE membership from the county would have. I don't know if there have been any more developments on that front, but I've sort of resigned myself to limited access to those resources. We're still working with county staff on that. But in terms of the racial equity toolkit, we do have a menu of steps that we've discussed. Our conclusion at the end of those was that we needed a greater degree of diversity within the work group that's been working on implementing the toolkit. And so we set out on a recruitment effort there. I'm pleased to say that we have three people who have agreed to take part in those conversations with us. I'm gonna wait until we can report to a fuller extent before talking about maybe next month, the composition of that work group. But I appreciate the interest in the people who have expressed that and look forward to restarting those conversations. Hopefully we'll have a couple of meetings under our belt by the time the task force reconvenes in October, and we'll have something to report there. Also, hopefully we'll have run some of that through the steering committee, and we'll have some endorsement for a plan and some steps that can be forthcoming on that. I have one other comment to add, but Jack, if there was anything from the steering committee that came up that you want to add at this point.
I can do it. The steering committee reporter just mentioned we talked about it at length. Mike gave a lengthy report, and my memory was one of the primary things he referred to was recruiting people with more lived experience. and continuing to communicate with the executive's office and really having this on the agenda today. And without Mike and Dan here, I think it's probably wise to just carry it over.
Okay. The one thing I wanted to add was I wanted to highlight, first of all, I wanted to thank Maya Vanya for circulating information on the State Bar Association's showing of a documentary called Who We Are, put together by Jeffrey Robinson. Many of you might be familiar with Jeff Robinson as an extremely prominent and accomplished Seattle attorney who then worked as legal director of the ACLU nationally. He's been a Guantanamo lawyer, and he himself is a person of color. Along with the daughters of William Kunstler, Jeff Robinson put together this documentary, Who We Are, which is both a historical lesson and a personal journey kind of thing. And the State Bar is promoting Zoom showings of it. Jill distributed the flyer that Maya forwarded in an email to all of us from last Friday. It requires registering. There are 3 days of Zoom showings of it, September 26th, 27th, 28th. And then on the 29th, there's a panel with Jeff himself and Supreme Court Justice McLeod talking about racial equity in the law. I just want to say I've seen this twice. I'm going to watch it at least one more time. This is the single most powerful racial equity presentation I have ever encountered. I'm taking off my chair's hat here and putting on my member's hat. Those of us who work in the law in any way, I just strongly encourage you to register for that and to watch it. It's touching, it's enraging, it's informative. And I see Amaya's hand up, so I'll stop ranting and I'll turn it over to her and to re-express my thanks for putting this in front of us.
Thanks, Stephen. I think it's going to be an incredible conversation between Jeff and the justice. So, but the movie itself is available on Netflix at any time. So while the flyer, if you don't have Netflix, there will be a link available so that you can watch it anyway, but you can watch it at your leisure anytime. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on the racial equality and Care Toolkit? Right, I think the next item needs to be carried over. Barry needs to report on this, and he is unable to join us today. He had jury duty, so he'd asked the Competency Restoration Workgroup topic be here. Does anyone here have anything that they would like to say regarding that before we move past it and carry it over next month? Yeah, Perry.
Morning, folks. Perry Mowry, Response Systems Division Supervisor. I've been working with Barry just a little bit. We had our initial meeting about a month ago, and I believe that we have another meeting scheduled for the 14th of October. Just discussing basically pathways to address the challenges for competency restoration in individuals that are affected within the jail in that regard. So I've collected some information for the group that has been attending and just has been recently in communication with Barry about setting up that next meeting. Just wanted to let folks know that particular piece.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, I don't see anyone. I don't see Dan or Mike from behavioral health. Am I missing something, or is that correct? Is that right, Stephen? Behavioral health is not with us today.
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay, so we'll carry that over, and I'm going to go to steering committee. And the steering committee, I love putting this report to the end because usually we've talked about most of the items by the time we get here. So we had our SAC update. We talked, as I mentioned previously, at length about the racial equity implementation strategy. We did talk about the year-end report, and we spent some time on that, and Jackie and Jill are working on that. We also talked a little bit about, Perry gave us some updates on the sequential intercept service inventory needs and gaps. And really, and a little bit of the competency restoration work group. Would Perry or Stephen or anyone, does anybody want to add anything to that? I think the minutes are pretty reflective of what we talked about. And that seems to match my memory. I mean, a lot of the time was spent talking really about the end of year report as well as the GARE implementation. But would anybody like to add anything? Perry?
I'm jumping in here a bit. Yes, one of the things that I'd just like to also share, I've recently been working with Marty Solomon, and forgive me, I can't remember Marty and Holly's company, but we are continuing to do work that was originated by the behavioral health gap analysis team. Obviously, folks remember the sequential intercept model, and then out of that came a needs recommendations chart. So I've been working with Marty recently just to really begin to identify some action steps related to that chart to continue to move those identified high needs components from the sequential intercept model into literally some movable parts. And so I'll be bringing that back to the steering committee and talking a little bit about that. We did quite a bit of work relative to, if folks recall, that there's really three primary components: the community behavioral health needs and recommendations. There's housing needs and recommendations, and then the jail services needs and recommendations. And so have done quite a bit more steps in sort of fleshing out the steps that can move forward as far as action steps with particularly the community-based behavioral health services. So just wanted to provide an update to that. And again, I'll bring that to the steering committee and talk about that. Just looking for confirmation of direction that we're traveling here in terms of the steps that are being taken.
Any questions for Perry? All right. I don't think too many of us will mind ending early on a busy Monday. But before we go to, let's see, I think the next is other business, and Stephen, I'll turn the meeting over to you to close it out. I did get an email from Chief Tanksley, and he and Raylene are part of a, the Washington Courts Alternatives to Incarceration group. And I thought it would be helpful if maybe Chief Tanksley and Raylene shared a little bit about that. I think it's good when we know what people are doing. So Chief Tanksley, if you're available, I don't know if you are, you're welcome to say something, or Raylene. Raylene, I see your hands up. We'll start with you.
I'm hoping that Chief Tanksley can help us out a little bit more. I started to participate in this meeting, the first meeting, the introduction meeting on Friday. Fortunately, I was coming back from a training, and I was intermittent as we were going through, but it seems like there are very similar goals. This stemmed out of some of the Gender and Justice Commission from the courts. But they're looking at alternatives for the courts statewide on ideas to reduce incarceration and alternatives. I'm sure that we can get a representative from that group to come and speak to us at one of our later meetings. Like I said, it was just the kickoff meeting on Friday, so it's in the early stages of a new program. And so we should have more information as we go. I don't know if Chief Tanksley has anything to add to that.
He is here with his hand up.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief Tanksley, it is all you.
Yes, so the program is sponsored by the Washington Courts Board of Judicial Administration, and essentially the goal is to have a strategic initiative for pre-trial and post-sentencing incarceration alternatives that's uniform and available through all the courts, regardless of a person's ability to pay or any other factors. It's a broad range of membership to that task force. For example, You have representatives from the Superior Court Judges Association, District Court Judge Association, and municipal courts. Then the Office of Civil and Legal Aid, Office of Public Defense, Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, and a group of other people. So in terms of law enforcement, it's 2 law enforcement representatives that were assigned those positions by WASPIC, the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Officers Association. So we will report back to this group as this task force kicks off and progresses through the system.
Thank you. And that's something I thought I'd bring up at steering committee to maybe have some reporting back, but particularly if you get some good ideas. I mean, hopefully with that statewide conversation, you can share perhaps some of the things we're doing that might be helpful, but I'm hoping we get some information back that might be useful to our task force as well. So thanks to both of you for agreeing to do that. Blaine it's an interesting roster if you look at the list, and Blaine is well represented, and it's great that you're both there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen, I'm going to turn it now over back to you.
Okay, well, that was other business, and Jack, we were on the same wavelength because I was going to raise that that exact point and call on Chief Tank and Raylene as well.
I'm sorry, I should have let you do it. And Raylene,
no,
you can still call on her.
I'm going to. Raylene.
Real quick on another matter, I just wanted to remind everybody, tomorrow afternoon, we're having the Joint Behavioral Health and Legal and Justice Subcommittee. We have somebody speaking from Watt Community College Substance Use Disorder Program. And interesting topic is the court child care program. And we have somebody from the Vanessa Beham Center in Spokane. There's a lot of information in a study that was done by the UW and in representing the state Supreme Court Gender Justice Commission on the effects of having a child care program and children in the court system. So if anybody's interested in that, please join us tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Raylene, for bringing that to our attention. Those joint meetings are always educational, and this sounds especially so. If there is no other business, then we're ready for public comment. Jill?
Thank you. It doesn't look like we have anyone attending in person in the council conference room today. For those of you attendees who are joining us remotely, if you'd like to speak to the task force now, please virtually raise your hand now. And no hands are raised.
Okay. Well, I think we have set some sort of task force record for ending early, but that's the nature of the business for this month. Thank you all for spending time together, and meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next meeting.